It's the 10th of January 2022. Welcome, everybody. A few technical difficulties here tonight. We just reposted the poll because I accidentally ended it, I guess. I don't remember clicking it, but so the poll, anybody who voted, please vote again if you think about it, because I smurfed that up. We're going to show everybody part 5 of pictures of Fukushima, and I put a link to the playlist of this series below. There's 4 previous videos, and allegedly, and we got the dates for this, each set of pictures, and we're just going to jump right into it. And these are actually hard videos to do, believe it or not. Hope everybody's doing good tonight. Let's jump back a little bit. So you had a accident per se in Japan where had a major earthquake, created a tsunami. Tsunami inundated a nuclear power plant, in particular is known as Fukushima, and hundreds of kilometers of the coastline resembled that. The red numbers to your right are people that died in those areas from the tsunami, and on the yellow are people that are missing from the tsunami. And you're looking at 600 kilometers of coastline where it was incredible damage and heartbreaks, of course. Okay, and so this accident per se, and nuclear is not an accident because its entire legacy is upon tricking you. As the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, the truth will come out about Fukushima. As the public, in other words, like the whole world, so what, the government officials are not going to get sick? You know what I'm saying, right? It's when every human on the planet, which means every insect and every bird and every mammal and every animal on this planet gets sick, people will finally point at Fukushima. It's an absurd statement, by the way, that even exists on our planet with those capacities. And then think about headlines like this originally. Levels consistently rise and fall in a 40-day cycle of radioactive fallout around the entire planet. And they're talking about models like this where this plume is a continuous plume right around the planet, but it's moving. And some parts of the plume are very, 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 very high. But even the low numbers are crazy numbers, right? But in comparison, some areas are extraordinary, huge numbers of radioactive fallout. And Canada lifted the restrictions on the food close to the nuclear meltdowns, or surrounding the nuclear meltdowns, in 90 days after it started. And that's a big issue because that's genocide against Canadians. And so think about this statement here, Tokyo professor. Every organism in Fukushima prefecture is contaminated with radiation, and 1.4 million becquerels a kilogram for excrement is not contaminated. That's holy smokes, man. That's not going to end good. 60 kilometers from the nuclear meltdown. And so food was prohibited not just from Fukushima prefecture, but 14 prefectures by 55 countries. So they got you, the majority of the population is lulled into thinking that it's just a single prefecture. What happened to be the biggest prefectures of Japan and was the food basket for the Asian countries. And that was the genocide of all countries, particularly Canada, because for 10 years they've been shipping it here with no competition, so they've been shipping extra stuff here than normally pre-Fukushima nuclear meltdown they would have, because everybody else was saying no, right? France says Japan has lost control, the French should leave the country. Think about that statement. Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo fearing radiation. And at ground zero, this is ground zero. So Tokyo is being abandoned by multiple countries, but at ground zero we're led to believe that everything is hunky-dory. And that these people are there stoically working on the site. Now, this guy here, look what he's doing. He's holding something that's burning with smoke coming off it. And in his other hand is a Geiger counter. It's a Geiger counter. You see more pictures of him coming up. And you see these pictures in the rubble. These people in the rubble. Now, they have paper suits on. They don't have Scotty backpacks, which are like dive tanks to give you fresh air for sure. Because these filters can't work in that environment. So this is part 5. This is where we left off on this picture on part 4. And so whoever got the job of going spray painting that's the gallows laugh. That's literally probably one of the worst jobs you can ever get on this planet. That's the equivalent of a death sentence to go do that. These are very high radiation. And so this is part 50, or this is folder 54. 54. Where are we to, Dana? Right here. So 54, highly radioactive debris found around Unit 1 reactor buildings. And these photos allegedly were taken on the 31st of March. This happened on March 11th. Okay, and so if you're not familiar with the subject, I'm going to try to educate you. You don't really need to see the other parts to comprehend what we're doing here and what you're looking at, because I'll walk you through it. So the reason that they're circling that is because that's such high numbers. That's a danger to humans. So they sent in one of the homeless, and as you'll see coming up, and got them to spray. There's a similar item right there that's got that, but you'll see that that's up right there, because you know where that picture was right here. Well, that piece up there is, oh, nice job, Dana. And that'll happen a few times tonight. Microsoft, making my life difficult. Okay, and so that's a lethal dose. That's right by Reactor 1. We're going to just start walking through them. We got some headlines, more headlines coming up for you. And number 1 detonator will show you some of that documentation coming up in Reactor 2, Reactor 3, Reactor 4 to get you up to speed. Now there's more material here. These are what they call extremely high radiation. And so whoever went in and sprayed that was getting, their organs will start melting. They will die shortly after doing this. And so these are frightening numbers. And as we go through this tonight, you'll understand there's nowhere on the site that's actually safe. And this is allegedly around, so we're still in the 50s, 54 rather, 007. You see the numbers up the top of the screen up there. These are guinea pigs that they sent in there. What they call disposable people. They picked up in Tokyo and other places. And they'll say, you go over there with the Geiger counter. I want to get a picture. Meanwhile, keep an eye on the Geiger counter. And the guy doesn't understand what the Geiger counter actually means. They're not going to tell him. And they'll get incredible doses, and then they'll back at it there and send that guy home. They'll give him $1,000 or something, but he'll die that day or that week, the victim. And that's the legacy of the nuclear industry. When we run out of homeless people, the world ends because we sacrifice them for this stuff. So you can see great damage at the nuclear site. Now they're down, these pictures are down by the pump house. So that's 55. Let's open up, let's have a quick look at what 55 is. The barge vessel entering the port also on the 31st of March. And you're not going to see these pictures anywhere else, period. This is the only place. Now this truck, this is a cement truck. It's meant for pumping heavy or thick sludge, not pumping water, pumping sludge, right? So it's a totally different mechanism. And they're going to use that to trick the planet, and they're going to get pictures of it allegedly pumping water in top of the 190-foot buildings. But in reality, all the inventory is already lost from those buildings, meaning they had multiple nuclear meltdowns, and that's the pump truck flexing. They're starting to get things ready, so they're flexing. So therefore, pumping cement is a total different application. And now you can see it deployed at Reactor 1. This is meant to make you believe that they're pumping water into a fuel pool and that it's intact. But that's simply not the case. And remember, this is the 31st. You've got to keep water in these fuel pools constantly because they boil off the pools because there's fuel rods, reactor cores in the pools at the very top. Which I know that's hard to believe. Why would you put fuel pools at the top of a building, a nuclear power plant? If you have a problem, you can't get near it. It makes sense not to put it there. And you can still see vehicles and everything pile up down by the shoreline or the water edge at the wharf reach. And this is a special built harbor that they have, and there's coming in with a barge. And I guess the barge is being towed behind them or something. That's a towboat. That's a towboat, and then that's the barge. There you go. Now he'll push the barge around. And this is the original pictures from March the 1st, the end of the first month. The accident happened on 11, so this is 20 days later. And they're bringing in a barge. Now, at Chernobyl, they sent in 600,000 victims. You won't see anything resembling that here. The inventory was long gone, so they needed a cover story. And people wearing, you can see up on the deck there, people wearing paper suits. At one point, TEPCO claimed each day they would take all the paper suits and they would burn them in the incinerators at the end of the day. They claimed 7,000 suits a day they were burning. But there's nothing there for 7,000 people to do is the problem. So that was just a fantasy. The nuclear industry dreamed up this kooky fantasy to lull the population into complacency. And so we're still in 55 section. And it's just a bunch of pictures of them coming in. Again, you see a few people back here. Right, you can see 10, 12, 14 people maybe there. And the barge you can't like pump all the water into the barge, or the barge is not useful for bringing water to them because the reactors, it's very complicated. You can't spray salt water basically on the reactors because the sulfur of the salt is a huge event when it comes in contact with the hot meltdowns. So again, we're seeing people with no backpacks in what they call paper suits. Some of these are what they call Tyvek suits. Of course, I call them all paper suits because in order to protect you from the emitters that are going on at the fuel pellets all over the place and the assemblies and stuff like this, you need a 4-foot lead suit, 4-foot thick lead suit. But they really are using paper suits, like the homeless and stuff like that. One thing about all these suits you'll see, there's no tears ever in them, there's no dirt on them, there's no indication that they're more than an hour old or something. And then you have TEPCO claiming, now so the barge was bringing in generators, there you go. And generators just to run like external power for the site because you got 600 kilometers of the coastline was washed away. There's no telephone poles, no infrastructures. All nuclear power plants also they run under external power supply only. So they need their own coal plants, oil plants, gas plants to power the entire nuclear death cult power plant site. And this is a death cult, a secret death cult. That's the only way you can possibly describe the nuclear industry. And also we have a poll tonight we want to talk about for 1 second before I get too far down the rabbit hole. Where are we to? 35. Okay, so the poll tonight is about: should food within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant, bear with me, should food grown within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant come with radioactive warnings? And we got 100% votes. I screwed up the original poll and had to repost it. 21 votes right away. And by the way, let me set, in case somebody wants to embed the live show. Whenever the show starts, Google likes to hang on, we'll get there. Google turns off the embed as soon as the video starts, so I have to go back down and activate the embed function on my videos. There it is, allow embedding. So Google turns that off because they hate my guts. And if you don't understand what that means, hang on, I'll show you. Google doesn't like me sharing my videos, that's for sure. So we pick any video, it doesn't matter. Let's pick that video. I'll show you what I mean. So we'll scroll down, we'll open up this again. And there's a feature everybody else has, but I don't have. So after the show is over, I can't publish to subscribers feed and notify subscribers. So that's turned off on all my videos immediately when I started up the site. And it just shows you this industry contempt for me. Hi everybody. There's a feature everybody else has, but I don't have. Hope everybody's doing good. So I was streaming another video I shouldn't have been streaming, basically. Let's keep it rolling. So we got 22. Let's come back over here for 1 second. So another thing about nuclear power plants is the farms, they build them in farmlands, which I know that seems incredible. And this is why the radioactive fallout is constant, because of the fuel pools are still splitting the atom. The nuclear waste is still splitting the atom, which means, so these nuclear power plants originally would power, say, 1 million homes. They do that by splitting the atom. And those atoms, though, are forever, by the way. And every day, when you take the reactor core out of the containment and put it in a pool with no containment, that fuel is still producing the same amount of atoms as you need for 1 million homes, to power up 1 million homes each day. So at the end of 1 year, if you just got one core in the spent fuel pool, you have 365 power plants worth of energy for 1 day, all around the planet, pulsing energy every second. And every day is 368, 369 worth of power plants released into the environment of the atoms originally took. So so the numbers, the best way to look at this is, in order to power 1 million homes each day in a 24-hour period, how many atoms does the fuel rods have to produce? Think about that. Because you can put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle and you can't see them. And that each atom is capable of making an insect or an animal or a bird or an animal or a mammal or a human violently ill in increments over time, your body attacks it forever. So when you're producing an absurd amount of isotopes and releasing it into the environment, they last forever. They're pulsing energy forever. They're looking for victims forever. And so having farms around a nuclear power plant is how the nuclear power plant keeps the radiation numbers down. It's on purpose. But people are going to eat the food, get sick, and die because of it. For sure. Not maybe, but for sure. And how much food does all of these farms produce? Here's a future nuclear power plant in the United Kingdom, surrounded by farms. On both sides, as far as you can see, by the way. And in Japan, they're actually growing food right by nuclear waste and shipping that worldwide. This is a death cult. This is disgusting and despicable and is unacceptable, and it's not tenable. Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo, 220 kilometers away because of Fukushima. Radiation levels around Fukushima nearing levels where humans vomit uncontrollably and their hair can strip from their bodies. But hey, let's find how many homeless people we can get and get them at Fukushima. And so they're not going to have nuclear scientists or nuclear academics or nuclear corporations there. They're going to find the most vulnerable of society for these jobs. It's a death sentence to go in there and work for one day. And at Hanford in the United States, if you work at Hanford for 8 hours, anywhere in the last 40 or 50, 60 years, you're actually entitled to a pension because you worked at a nuclear site for 8 hours. So that should kind of hopefully give you some context into how dangerous this is in such a short period of time. And Luxembourg has just passed a law a couple of years ago that you can sue a nuclear power plant 30 years after it has an accident. Because it could take 30 years before these diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries manifest or are diagnosed. Or it could happen tomorrow morning too, right? Because if you're eating radioactive food from Japan, so this is a pump barge, so they want to pump water under reactors. Pumping salt water under reactors is not desperation, it's basically you have given up. That's the worst case scenario, is you're going to pump salt water. And the salt water, when it lands on 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, which is what the reactors will burn at, liquefied reactors are burning at, the sulfur is liberated from the salt water. They knew about this in the 50s from open ocean testing with nuclear weapons. They knew about this phenomenon where the sulfur is radioactive sulfur peroxide hydrogen. They're like a little buckyballs, spherical shaped to them like a soccer ball. They'll ingest hot particles, the curium, the uranium, plutonium, the americium, neptunium, into the spherical sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. And they're now very super hot particles. They're easily liberated into the environment. They're not solutable in water per se. And they're very mobile. They can cross the ocean without the jet streams, etc., etc. And they like to hang out close to the surface, 2 or 3 feet off the surface of the Earth, which is a very vulnerable spot for most of the species and children and small animals, etc., right? But even humans, obviously, right? Because this, you breathe it in, and this sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. And you will pay dearly for the rest of your life because of that. And so it's a very stupid, unwise thing to do, but you just had a tsunami wipe out most of your country. You needed to cover up the nuclear accident because nuclear is more important than all the 8 million species and all the humans, except for them, of course. And so the industry is it's completely out of control. It's completely genocidal, and it's a death cult, as demonstrable by the fact that they build the nuclear power plants and the fuel pools in farmland. In farmland. It just defies any rationale. And I collected up 100 pictures without even trying of nuclear power plants. And they were all in farmland. And so what I'd done was I just gave you some regular pictures to keep those connotations front and center, because that is a threat to 1 billion people a year. It's shocking. The whole story about nuclear is one of endless betrayal, endless deceit, endless destruction, endless contamination, permanent exclusion. The Bikini Atolls, there's 1 million square kilometers. 1 million square kilometers is unbelievably radioactive. And you have all kinds of species migratory through that area, and that sterilizes the females. And over generations, all of a sudden, they stop producing offsprings, and then they disappear. And that's how this actually works. So these pictures allegedly taken, we're at 58. So it wouldn't hurt to wear my glasses when I'm doing this, but just to read the little tiny number. So 58 is, scrolling. So conditions of area around a solid waste storage, and I apologize for that. And conditions of the area around the solid waste treatment facility were the last couple of spots we were looking at was those. And I got to keep on top of that. My apologies. So now this one, 58, is April the 1st. April the 1st. April Fool's Day. Conditions of the former administration office building around Unit 1, nitrogen tanks. And then 59 is protection of the hose installed on the road. So that we know we jumped. That'll also be on April Fool's. And so what you're looking, these pictures are from the alleged infamous Fukushima 50. But the official narrative, if you go look it up, was that they had 6,000 people here working on that date. And obviously they don't. And there's no, so this 58 is the administration building around Reactor 1. And you can see no windows left in it. Now, there's two reasons. Could be the tsunami ran through it, and also could be multiple detonations of these 190-foot reactor buildings. And this is down by the pump houses. This is not by Unit 1. Okay, so that's 50, that's 60. So we just seen 59 was just 1 or 2 pictures. And now we're getting up to 60. Let's cover some more headlines. 60, when we start there in a few moments, are also April the 1st. Conditions of the seaside area, Unit 4, and the entrance of the trench vertical shaft. Conditions of seaside area of Unit 4, which is on the other side of the pump houses. Okay, let's get it done. Okay, so back to the headlines. So the original numbers down there were here being stripped from people's bodies. That's going to be forever. EU Energy Commissioner calls Fukushima an apocalypse, and that almost everything out of control. But everything was out of control. And there's no doubt any other country would have done any better, because it's nuclear. Like, they already know that all you can do is kill people, so what's the point? And Tokyo's lost almost all control of events at Fukushima. That was the 15th. So that was, on that day, that was the day, at that point, by the 15th, there was 4 reactors had detonated and melted down. And the fuel pools that caught fire and were raging out of control. And he decided to cover that up because there's incredibly evil industry. They have never, ever, not a single time in history, had a real conversation. And never in history have they actually had a real debate. It's always they have control opposition, debate them with pre-wrote questions and answers, and they publish that. into the gobblish medias. Officials unsure what to do next. Koreans call Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. Nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. So if your oil plant breaks down, do you expect to see headlines like that? If your gas plant breaks down, do you expect to see headlines like that, or your coal plants? And by the way, those emissions, coal, oil, and gas, do not make emissions like this. This is, by the way, just 20 days after. If you had to let the model run for another 10 days, the rest of the planet would have disappeared in radioactive fallout too. This is a continuous plume covering the entire planet. Gas, oil, and coal doesn't do that. Not only that, radiation like that, this invisible plume from the troposphere to the ocean floor, is pulsing at 186,000 miles per second. Almost at the speed of light. So gamma, alpha, beta, neutrons, they pulse energy every second, almost at the speed of light. And this is what makes it so dangerous, is that kind of energy. And so if you breathe it or drink it or consume it, or you live in it, and I've got no Geiger counter tonight because I was so burnt out last night, I forgot to charge the battery. It's currently on the charger, but that's no good to us. And I wasn't going to do a show tonight, but I decided that, like last night's show was a recap of 2021, and who knows how many of them it's going to take to get through that series. And this is a recap of the original pictures. And I have to do all of this because Google took down my main site with 24,000 subscribers with no strikes, no warning, and no explanations. And so in emergency, I was out on a research expedition counting spiders, 400 kilometers away from home. Had to find my way home and start up a new account so people can find me to get the research out there. It's an extinction event where I'm currently too. And we've done all the research on the West Coast also for 6 years to Alaska, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean. That's an extinction event. And it's just the whole bloody experience is just terrifying and heartbreaking. The research that we have managed to pull off verifies our worst nightmares, unfortunately. This is an extinction event. This is an extinction level event for sure. And we documented it, total extinction for the west coast of the North America, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. That's an extinction event. That documentation is up at my website, thenuclearproctologist.org. And it's very shocking. 7,500 highly visible species exterminated, and it's permanent. So they sterilized the ocean also. Former top International Atomic Energy Agency official, actually Fukushima is a catastrophe for every citizens of the world. Radiation doesn't recognize borders. So therefore, it's a catastrophe for every insect on the planet, all the bacteria, all the animals and mammals and birds and creatures that we haven't even identified are being exterminated by this insidious, invisible, frightening event. Air samples in Tokyo 270 times more contaminated with just gamma. And this is another despicable thing we've been looking at for 11 years almost, is the industry refuses sometimes, but 98% of the times they only recognize gamma. Okay, let's come back over to the pictures maybe. Yeah, to the pictures. And so you got to protect these lines. You can see the lines they're not functional. Those, whatever that's for. So this is the water side. That's the pump houses. See the chunks up top of the roof taken out of the pump house? In the background, that's reactor 3 or 4 up there. I guess that's reactor 4 at the very tip of it with the wreckage of a 190-foot building. Obviously, some of the debris from the detonations took out chunks of the pump house. That's not really And then you can see the tsunami debris, how it made the entire site now into a just... Now these pictures are probably 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months after, but they're claiming that these pictures are on April Fool's Day, 3 weeks, not even 3 weeks after the nuclear meltdown started. And the numbers that, and the documentation that I'm showing you tonight, you can't, both of them can't be true, see? So you're very rarely seeing any people, and it's basically just a couple of people, and then for the barge there happen to be 10, 14 rather. And so this is the seaside. The reactors are on the other side you're facing of those pump houses. They need 1 million gallons a minute, so they have these big pump houses. Each reactor needs 1 million gallons, 4,500 tons every minute. So at this stage, they have brought in some excavation equipment, and we're clearing paths. Now, the whole idea wasn't to come up with solutions, because they would have brought in the military and there would be thousands of people there. The job was to build a public relation story to cover up this incredible event. And so the pictures that they're releasing, you notice majority of them are very blurry, which is what you would expect at a nuclear meltdown. And they would have these spotters, and their job was to spot for the guy in the machine there. And so they're exposed to terrible doses, both of them. Again, that's a spotter, right? He's got one of the worst jobs. He would have died that year at most. Again, a lot of the pictures are very blurry, and they never gave us the best pictures. They only released probably the worst pictures that were taken. But they give you incredible insight into the site, that the site is completely dysfunctional, that there really is nothing there that is usable. And these particular pictures, they got no tools. They're wearing no Scottish backpacks like dive gear that have your oxygen supply while you got ongoing nuclear meltdowns. And again, they're wearing these paper suits or Tyvek suits, most likely paper suits, because there's so much talk about these paper suits over the years. And when you're talking about 7,000 suits a day, they were claiming, you're talking about real money each day that you're going to have to burn, right? And when you burn these radioactive suits, you're going to liberate the radiation back into the environment. The whole industry has done everything wrong from the get-go, because the entire legacy here is predicated upon lies and deceptions. And you're going to see a guy stood up alongside of this coming up later. That I recognize that one. And so total destruction everywhere. All kinds of vehicles. But there was all kinds of hot fuel particles that were... Now this is, my apologies, we're at 61. Let's go look at what 61 actually is. Spraying anti-scattering agents. 61A, B, C, and D are all spraying. And these were allegedly taken on Halloween of 2011. Or Halloween. On April Fool's Day. And so this is the worst. What they're doing is they're spraying allegedly a reagent, is what they call it. And it's supposed to bind with radiation and coat it and stop it from splitting the atom and emitting atoms. So pellets were distributed all over this area. And so whoever was spraying the reagents in these areas you're looking at would have got lethal doses being in that environment. And so when you see the red spray mark, that means incredible doses. Again, remember, they're spraying reagents. in this area. And so that vehicle will come up later on. They got a homeless guy there with a Geiger counter. I got no idea what that's supposed to be. I guess that's the area they're going to spray the regions in. And nobody knows what they're writing there, but I can guarantee it's not good. There we go. Now he's holding something in his hand, look at that. And so what he's got, like some kind of wick, and it's burning. And then in his hand he's got a Geiger counter. So the next picture, he's holding the Geiger counter, right? And you can see the wire. Now there's a wire, right? So before there's no wire, right? There's no wire here whatsoever. But what appears to be a wick with smoke, and you can see the direction the wind's blowing. And that's that same vehicle where they were spraying regions. So he was a guinea pig, and he's wearing this incredibly useless, it's like a paper suit you buy for painting, right? And they're always in perfect condition, they're never torn, there's no scratches on it. And they're claiming, and we don't know what that number is for sure. Now, so the if that's millisieverts, again, that's the guy who was holding it there before they got a picture of it. And so I'm not sure what the numbers are on that. But these would be lethal doses there. You will die that day or that week from that kind of exposures. And the numbers they're trying to show you, of course, are meant to downplay it. That's the only reason they released these particular numbers. So this is another thing we've seen with the industry where they give them garbage Geiger counters, get their picture for pictures, right? And then these pictures live forever, of course. And they're told to put it down by the ground, blah, 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 blah. And this is a different type of Geiger counter. And it's in millisieverts. And millisieverts, each millisievert is 1,000 microsieverts. But you're not going to measure in microsieverts here, you're going to measure in sieverts. And I'll actually show you some of that coming up, these numbers. It was actually 1 million sieverts by Reactor 1. You can't be on the other side of the pump house and it's not 10,000 sieverts. And so this is long, and now this X, look at the X on the ground. This is probably literally the worst job you can ever dream of having. And they gave him these for a false sense of hope, but they wanted the pictures. And the pictures are extraordinarily good shape, that particular picture. And his job is to go in and stick the Geiger counter. And this is the norm, right? Like SafeCast, I covered that last night. They showed up right away across Japan. And anybody that wanted to get active and get the radiation numbers, they were helping them. They were giving them shitty, garbage, handmade Geiger counters. And I had a list of the executives from SafeCast. It's really, you lose faith in humanity when you read that story and see that documentation. You realize how evil society actually is, how incredibly insidious. When you see stuff like that here, you should lose faith in humanity that they're using Geiger counters like this. These are the degenerates that are doing that. And the people that are holding it don't know any better. They don't have a clue what that actually means. They're the victims of society. So they're claiming it's 4,000 microsieverts there right now. And that's a nasty dose, don't get me wrong. But it's obviously got to be incredibly worse than that. Because you're talking about so much fuel, the detonations and everything else were huge detonations. You're talking about in Tokyo, it's way more radiation than it is at ground zero. right? So Tokyo was 270 counts per minute in the air, and which is different than microsieverts or millisieverts or unisieverts, right? They're not counting becquerels, but they do say for this the lead sludge where it's 100 million per cubic centimeter of becquerels. Becquerels is a physical atom that is pulsing energy. A unisiever is kind of like heat that comes off a stove, except it's radiation. It's energy from radiation itself. And when high numbers like that hit your animal or human's bodies, their organs start to melt. And you can stick them in a slingshot and fling them 70 miles away and they land with a parachute, perfect on the ground, but their organs will still keep melting until they die that day. Once that happens to your body is irradiated. This is not an external thing that you can dust off after. This penetrates right through your entire body and goes another 50 feet. And so the Geiger counter is only accounting for just one emitter at best, even if they were accurate. And then, so Tokyo, 270 times more contaminated than global weapons failure peak. So 270 times 270 per square meter in Tokyo. Water cannons can't spray the reactors because the radiation levels are too high. Well, that's forever. The helicopters can't spray water because there's too much radiation. But we're supposed to believe that people are at ground zero and 2 weeks later. This is absurdness. This is incredibly absurd. So these pictures are meant to deceive and manipulate the population. Oh, and you got a couple people over there in their paper suits. It's terrifying that these people are wearing... Now, if you look at what they use at nuclear power plants, the industrial radiation suits, they're very expensive, $4,000 or $5,000 each, and they're very, very thick. And they blow up you like a big Smurf going down the road, right? What they got here are pointless. It's pointless. Just well as send them in their jeans. It's pointless to give them something. Well, your jeans are actually at least 6 times thicker than the suits they're giving them. They burn these suits at the end of the day. The industry's a lunatic at best, right? I think that these are terrifying pictures. To send somebody in and make them do that at a nuclear meltdown. I mean, there's a lot of places on the site they still don't have control of because of radiation. The first thing they done was use big, huge bulldozers to... I don't know what I got going on. They used huge bulldozers, 0.82 millisieverts at a nuclear meltdown. But in North America, it was 220 million atoms of iodine-129 per liter of rainfall. But at ground zero, they claimed they got nothing. Hang on. That always makes me sick to my guts when you do that. Radiation, high-level radiation prevents the helicopters from dumping water on the spent fuel rods. Well, that's exactly what you would expect, right? And you would expect you could get within a mile of the reactors because of the gamma shines, the neutron bursts, the X-rays. And so the pictures that they say they're getting on March the 31st that were shown earlier and April the 1st we're showing now, you couldn't get low numbers all of a sudden. It simply doesn't work that way. Researchers too frightened to get closer than 100 kilometers from the meltdown after seeing radiation readings. But right at the plant itself, they want you to believe that it's just harmless numbers. So the industry had this history of lying, and if it tells the truth, then the house of cards fall down, right? And to go in, look at this picture here, man. That is terrifying. That is terrifying to be that close to the high radiation levels and to give you a crappy Geiger counter. But it's like, no, 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 get a little closer. I need a better picture. And again, that's right by that truck. Yeah, right here. Yeah, right there. My God, eh? So he's spraying, it's a green reagent on the hot numbers, right? They send in the homeless with the Geiger counter, and they're probably, each number is probably a sievert, not a millisievert. It's just because they can recalibrate these things. And so they said, okay, now we got to get the next homeless bunch to come in, send that bunch home, give them $100. They'll bring in another bunch, and they were supposed to give them 2,000 or 10,000 each for that day. They put that in their pockets, see? So at the end of the first day, they got $50,000 cash in their pockets. So it's easy to order people to go in on the second day, right? Now all of a sudden they got $100,000. They go and buy a house somewhere. After 3 or 4 days, now all of a sudden the people that are in charge got a lot of money, and they got all these homeless people coming at them. This is what we see going on from the documentation over the last 11 years was actually happening. And so this person, though, whoever's doing that, they would have died that day, if not within a few hours of doing this. And the idea, again, is that this stuff binds to everything, creates like an epoxy coating, which stops radiation, stops the emissions of the splitting of the atom. It's a temporary containment, basically. So it stops it from floating around and getting incredible numbers. So you notice a lot of the pictures from very far away, of course. And that's not an accident. So this was by, this is still part 61 of spraying regions. And so now all of a sudden there's a lot of that there where they got mud puddles, right? Yeah, these are crazies. And they're told to write the numbers on their pants, and then that's used then to downplay the numbers that are actually there. You can't use these millisieverts, microsieverts at a nuclear meltdown. That's an insult. That's just murder to do stuff like that. I really, truly disrespect them for doing that. And I have to, because they took down my original site, and I used to have the links to 4 million redacted emails where they talk about a lot of what I'm talking about right now. And I've spent months and months and months, several hours each day reading through these redacted emails. I downloaded so much of that stuff just in case they took it offline. And I really should get back at it again, because these were horror stories when you were reading these redacted emails. So a lot of it was redacted, but a lot of it wasn't. A lot of it's pretty easy to read between the lines. They despise humanity and the 8 million species. And these are fascinating pictures. They're not spraying the regions because it's 2.3 millisieverts, okay? It's got to be several sievers before they're going to spray regions, because it's a big site, and they're hoping the numbers, see, and this is what they're trying to prove now, the numbers are coming down because they have already sprayed the regions. This is allegedly what they're told, the people that are boots on the ground, but the people who ordered them to do it knows the real story. Yeah, perpetual lawyers. That's what we've noticed now. And this is going on long before Fukushima, this perpetual lying and murder machine. Let's come back over to a few more headlines. This is, oh, I'm sorry, we're at 62. What is 62 series? 61s were all spraying regions. 62 is conditions in the area in the power station site where landslides occurred, and they were taken also on April the 1st, 2011. And same thing, when we get to the heavy load trucks, we know we're at 63s. So right now we're just started at 62s. This is where the landslides, so the stuff you're looking at is where they had landslides. That's the worst job. Any job on this site is the worst job. Spraying regions, you're considered disposable when you get that job. They know you're going to die that day or that week at best. I'd say within hours some of those people would have died for sure. And so they're clearing out drainage ditches or something. This is where the landslide, they say, happened. And again, these fuzzy pictures. And that's, I'm not sure what that is. It looks like a special truck you would use for moving a cast. But so this is pictures at the top of Reactor 1. This is 64. Wow. I gotta pay attention, man. Checking the heavy load truck. Is that truck? Oh yeah, that's right, the truck. 64, where we're to right now. Images of the upper part of Unit 1 reactor taken by a camera installed on the cement pump. On the concrete pump. Right, I remember that one now. Okay, so before we get into that one, which is that one, let's come back over to some more fun headlines and to Dana's. Researchers too frightened to get closer than 100 kilometers from the meltdown after seeing radiation levels put at ground zero with the Geiger counters. It was okay. That's what I mean. The industry is disgusting. High radiation forces withdrawal of workers trying to restore power. Well, that meant you're not going back for a couple of years. You can't restore power to these buildings that are destroyed, as you'll see coming up. What we got going on here? Hi, everybody. Yeah, James Lucy got it right. Taste of tinfoil in the back of the mouth was the last symptom reported for unconsciousness. Yeah, I bet you that's actually accurate, and that sailors on USS Ronald Reagan were within 1 mile of the nuclear meltdown. And that's what they actually had reported. And then they were lined up in the toilets, and the toilets were all incapacitated because everybody had diarrhea, which is from the incredible radiation doses. In fact, all their watches had stopped, digital watches stopped working at the same time. So they would have got, a lot of them got lethal doses of radiation. It's time to make a geezer suicide squad. So they're not talking about nuclear scientists. They had 54 nuclear power plants in Japan at the time. None of them volunteered to go to Fukushima. Nuclear universities, they didn't volunteer to go to Fukushima. The nuclear students didn't volunteer. No, it's time to make a geezer, which is a derogatory slang for older people. And whoever said that should be stuck in jail because of their contempt for humanity. TEPCO admits it will run out of homeless in 5 years because it's not nuclear scientists there. Vice Governor, all of Japan must face it. The Vice Governor of Tokyo suggested a Fukushima draft. Because nuclear power plant employees are not going to go there. Nuclear academics are not going to go there. Scumbag nuclear scientists are not going there. 60 and older should be prepared to die at your broken power plant. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. If your gas plant or oil plant or coal plant breaks down, do you think your media is going to come out with headlines like that? 60 and older should be prepared to die. All of eastern Japan evacuated. The Fukushima plant was abandoned. Well, as I showed you already, right, the food was contaminated in 14 prefectures. You can't contaminate the food in 14 prefectures without contaminating the humans and all the species too.
Another example, immediately after the first hydrogen explosion, TEPCO gave out an order a request to all of these labor dispatching companies, and they said, send us people who don't mind dying. At that
Open Gundam style. BBC, people were taken from movie theaters by the police. This one, Sellafield, melted down and forced to go into reactors and deal with the burning fuel. I put together the graphics of a documentary, a little clip.
From the factory had turned up looking for...
I'll start that again. Hey, so you're talking about how the police turned up looking for volunteers.
The police from the factory had turned up looking for volunteers, and they brought a bus, and they decided the best way to get the volunteers was to go to the cinema and volunteer the back 2 rows at the show to go into the factory to, as it turned out, to help push the fuel rods out of the reactor. The police.
So they kidnapped people from the back rows of the theater to go into the nuclear meltdown in the United Kingdom in Sellafield, which was called Windscale at the time. And then after that, the scandal of that, they changed the name from Windscale to Sellafield, which is still melting down today. The mixed oxide fuel reactor that melted down there. And is hemorrhaging 8 million liters a day into the Atlantic Ocean for over 60 years. Forbes is, if anybody around here knows, Forbes is despicable. They're ruthless nuclear industry. And even they said it was outrageous that homeless people are being sold to companies and put to work on the Fukushima radiation. Let me get to it. There we go. Okay, and so back to the pictures again for everybody. This is Reactor 1, the top of Reactor 1. So there's so much heat, there was a detonation, and hopefully we'll get to those pictures in a little bit. This is the first pictures. Now you got to realize this is the top of a 190-foot building where there was decades of reactor cores. Now on the frame it says 0401, which is April Fool's Day. So this one could be real, but the other ones they showed us with the dates can't be real. It had to be much later. And these are really grainy pictures, of course, but it's everything is evidence. And I got the pictures or the video of the detonation. Hopefully we get to that in a little bit of this reactor building. Again, a lot of the pictures that they did release were very grainy pictures. This is 2011 digital camera technologies. You're only looking at 2 or 3 megapixels on the pictures, right? In 2011. Now it's like a gazillion megapixels for your cell phone. But back then, this was cutting edge technology. The digital was, but it had some incredible flaws. And then the ones on the drones, you can imagine how terrible they are. So this is up by the administration building, up high, looking out towards the ocean. And so all the debris here is very scary stuff. And they're probably in a vehicle taking these particular pictures. This is shocking. Again, these are put there for some particular reason. Now you can't get near those stacks. You see those stacks? You actually can't get near the base of those stacks. So how can you get near the buildings themselves, right? Because the base of the stacks are lethal doses. So the damage up here would have been from detonation. There's no way the tsunami reached that high. So imagine how big the detonation was actually. It actually was incredible. Again, a lot of these pictures are from a moving car or a truck or a vehicle of some type. And a lot of these were these cranes you're looking at, or this excavator, for instance. This one looks like there could be a human in it. But there's a lot of evidence showing that a lot of these cranes, there was people in trucks within 100 feet of the cranes, and they were operating, or the excavators, they were operating the excavators. It gives you context of how much radiation was actually in those particular areas. These pictures, this stuff could have been from the detonation, which is, otherwise the vehicles would be piled up on each other, right? But because they look like they're uniformly parked properly, this is mostly from the detonation. Tore off the mirrors, busted all the windows with projectiles from these 190-foot buildings. And you give them really thin paper suits, and tell them they're going to be okay. And so most people don't know any better. So obviously that's not a scientist, because he's not going to put on a paper suit and go in here. I don't have any evidence of a nuclear scientist ever visiting the site. Let's see if we can spot anybody in these things. I'm always curious. There's nobody actually in that one. Once again, they do show some pictures of the trucks where a bunch of little TV screens and little joysticks where they're allegedly operating some of these machines. And we probably won't get to them pictures tonight. So this would have been way later. There's zero possibility. And this is 66. We started at 54 tonight. So 66 is debris removal around Unit 1 and Unit 2 switchyard. And the next one is water discharge into Unit 1. That would have been with the cement truck. But cement trucks don't pump water. They pump cement. And cement is a total different viscosity than water is going to be, right? There's Unit 1 there, and that's the pump. Look at the pump up there. Now the reactors need 1 million gallons a minute to keep from melting down, or keep them cool. Once they start melting down, their temperatures increases tenfold, and so you need 10 million gallons a minute. You need like normal operation, you need 4,500 tons of water a minute. The most these could produce is around 300 tons a day. So they're simply about deception, right? They're 100% about deception. Let's zoom in. I got that smurfed up already. Hang on. I just want to see what these little paper suit guys are doing, what they're wearing, because that creeps me out to see people there. Let's see if there's anybody driving this thing. Yeah, there's somebody in there. Come on. Let's keep her going here. And that's Reactor 3 right there. So there's incredible gamma shines, X-rays, and neutron bursts up here. So that's why when you see people with these disposable suits, these paper suits, they're considered disposable people. And they got no equipment, no radios, no Geiger counters in their hands. They're what you call spotters, right? And their job is to give the guy in the machine some comfort that somebody else is stupid enough to go there with them. These are not nuclear corporations, nuclear companies. These are not nuclear academics. These are not nuclear scientists. These are not journalists. These are not people, spectators from universities. These are not power plant employees that are volunteer from other places. These are not even, like Fukushima power plant had thousands of employees. They didn't go there to go to work after. And so when you're on eye level with Medusa and Reactor 3 in the background, that's Medusa. There's no, because like the gamma shine travels in a straight line, but a gamma shine would travel right through an apartment building and kill you on the other side of it in increments. It's very powerful stuff, right? And so these people would have died that day that are up here. But he got a broom in his hand. Tell me he hasn't got a broom in his hand. My God. The nuclear industry is a lunatic, boy. These are lunatics. It could be Photoshop too. Who knows with this industry? Even though that looks real to me. And there's another guy with a broom. And a nuclear meltdown, cleaning it up, Dana. Of course they got brooms. That's the damnedest thing I've ever saw. That is the most lunatic thing I've ever saw. That's 66. What is 66? Debris removal around Unit 1 and Unit 2 switchyard. Eye level with Reactor 3. My God, man. How can you be so heartless to send people in there? And give them brooms at a nuclear meltdown. Let me check the time here. Yeah. Now, part 1, 2, 3, and 4 of this series was typically 1 hour and 10, 1 hour and 20 minutes long. Because I really, really, really wanted people to learn about this. And the only way that I can... Homeless people are being sold. Sold you that. TEPCO, Mitsu run out. Oh, yeah. So all plants need coal, oil, gas plants. All nuclear power plants need coal, oil, and gas plants to run. It's craziness. It's craziness. Temporary workers fighting to repair the crippled Japanese nuclear plant. Temporary workers. You know, temporary workers are people that work for minimum wage at shit jobs, right? These are not academics. UN officials astounded the homeless are taken to work in Fukushima ready to die. At the end of the month, they're left with no pay, and they end up in debt to the employers after food and housing. So it's evil. It's evil to do that to the heroes. These are actually heroes. The mentally handicapped are the heroes of the nuclear industry, working at the Fukushima plant after the meltdowns, often given worse radiation suits than the regular employees. Well, there's no TEPCO employees there. We've been at this for years. In fact, unskilled and the destitute are the people that are hired to go there because there's no one they can complain to, see? Help Wanted ad seeks employees able to carry out a conversation. Some people not being given food have no place to go. We can only work momentarily. It can't progress. We always need new workers. Some co-workers are really tempered. They use violence. Yeah, go over there. I said go over there. And they get, they're supposed to get $3,000 danger pay each day. And then their employers will give them $200 or $300 and take the cash and put it in their own pocket. Greed is a terrible incentive for evilness. There's no incentive not to be evil on top of that, right? In fact, there's a huge incentive to be evil. TEPCO raises the safe radiation exposure limits of Fukushima plant 500 times the original levels. Now, you notice earlier they were using Geiger counters in millisievers, microsievers. But when he set the limits up from 180 counts per minute, which was pre-meltdown, it was 55 counts per minute. Once meltdown happened, he increased it to 180 counts per minute. Then he increased it to 100,000 counts per minute, but only reported as a 2.5-fold increase, which these are atoms we're talking about. Fukushima worker wanted to escape from the nuclear plant but feared he might hurt me. A top doctor, number one doctor, dealing with nuclear workers demanded government step in at Fukushima plant for safety reasons, as some are unable to read. So these people they're good people, but they're incapable of understanding what needs to be done, or what the actual what's dangerous and what's not, right? And so this exhibition of evilness is more than enough reason for the entire planet to turn on nuclear. Certainly turn your back on it. Mentally disabled are working at Fukushima Daiichi. Don't turn your back, rather pay attention. Right? And they can't handle you looking at them. Many men are forced to go to the plant homeless or treated like disposable people. And I alluded to that many times already. Workers are tricked to being on the front lines of the plant. They kept me in a shed at a nuclear meltdown. There's nowhere else to go. You're brainwashed. After a few days, they throw you away. Right? So I'm trying to give you an accurate depiction of what's actually going on there from the get-go tonight in particular, and dispel that the nuclear has any kind of handle on this event, because they've never went there, so they can't have a handle on it. Harvard hasn't went there, University, Yale University, Stanford University, Oxford University, MIT, etc., the Commonwealths. None of the major institutions ever went there. None of them, you know what I'm saying? None of them, no discipline out there, no academics of any discipline out there volunteered to go there. And let's go back to the pictures. So, obviously the pictures and the people I'm showing you, right, are not TEPCO employees. They're not nuclear academics or nuclear scientists or nuclear alumni or nuclear students or nuclear companies or et cetera, and they're wearing completely inferior suits that are incapable of protecting you. And to see that picture there of a person with a birchy broom, handmade birchy broom, made from old birch, because that's what it looks like. I used to make them when I was young. We used to do everything in traditional ways. So we used to use them for cleaning our boats, was the birchy broom. And so that guy there has got a broom in his hand, and he's at eyeball level to Medusa, and anybody that looks Medusa in the eye dies. It's a surreal, and it's a terrifying picture, but it does show you the nuclear industry is a spineless, soulless, mindless, heartless creep. Yeah, with a broom. He's got a broom, and he's got a broom. My God, man. And I never actually noticed that before. I just noticed it just here tonight as we were doing this. And I was looking at it and I was going, I should have my glasses on because that looks like a broom. That can't be a broom. No, wrong again, Dana. So everything is covered in a just absurd amount of radioactive fallout The last thing you want to use there is a broom. The very last thing you want to be doing is sweeping radioactive dust with a broom. Like, I almost feel like going out and throwing up because my stomach is literally just dropped out of me as I'm looking at this. 6629. That's the number we're at right there. I'm gonna stop that right there. We'll pick up there for the next show on this topic, which very well might be tomorrow night. I do notice these shows are really hard on me. It's just the enormity of what I'm looking at, really. For me, like, because I covered this for so many years, it terrifies, this stuff actually terrifies me and terrorizes me. 6629, they say. Yeah, that's so how did we do on the poll tonight? Let's have a quick boo at that. Should food grown within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant come with a radioactive warning? And 45 votes. I had to redo the poll twice because somehow or another it got in it just as we went live. Somebody accidentally voted no, apparently. But you should never eat food from nuclear power plants. I'm going to end that poll at 45 votes, 93%. I'll end that right now so I don't forget to end it. Well, what we've seen over the last decade on research expeditions is undeniable. And if we didn't do the research expeditions, we wouldn't have the documentation. And so, despite the absurd amount of work that it takes to do all of this over these years, it's right. The idea is nobody else is going to do the work, then somebody needs to get it done, and they got to be honest, and they got to be able to articulate the issues, right? And so it's something that has to be done. That's why we do what we do. It's got to get done, and it has to be done right, in the hopes that the world finds this information and knows that good people did exist, good people did try. That there really was. It wasn't the nuclear industry, right? It wasn't universities. It wasn't the medias. They stabbed us in the back and left us to bleed out on planet Earth. We'll pick up back here too on the next show. We'll just let it go at that. And so this is part 5. There's a link below to the playlist of this particular series of the pictures. And remember, you can survive. Jimmy Carter did. Jimmy Carter. They really blew Jimmy Carter's participation in Chalk River nuclear meltdown in Canada out of proportion. That's the industry, right? That's the industry. Let's say goodnight to everybody. We'll call it a night here. And in the next show, we might as well pick up again and try to get through this, because I'd rather have the information out there. And depending if there's any breaking stories coming out, we might cover them tomorrow night. And I probably should have waited till tomorrow night because I'm exhausted. Just from last night's show it was a crazy show, right? That's a lot of work. It's all good. I'll just put out some outgoing music here. We'll call it a night. Thank you, everybody. And we'll just end it right here. I'll do a shout out again tomorrow night. Thank you, James Lewis, my friend. Thank you, Dana and Asana. You guys are awesome. Hugs for everybody. Albert, Peacewear, Colette, Ella, James, Megan. Good night, everybody. I'll catch the rest of you. I'll read your comments later. That's what I used to do after the show. I'll have a cup of tea. And when I sit down, I'll read through the comments. And then I'll try to switch off because for me it's late at night, right? And it's hard for me to sleep after I do these shows each night, but this is the best time of the day for me to do the shows. And the shows are more important, right? Yeah, God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Every thinker, Daryl, Robert, anybody else I missed, my apologies. We'll get to everybody. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. And have a great night and great day tomorrow. God bless everybody. Mangan. Okay, I'll try to get it, James Mangan. I don't know why your name gives me such a hard time, my friend. Have a great night, folks. Take care, everybody.